Hello and welcome to this video series on smart licensing for firepower devices. This series of 8 videos will hopefully guide you through the topic of smart licensing and how it applies to both firepower threat defense and ASA firewalls. The whole series covers the following topics: a general overview of smart licensing for both firepower threat defense and ASA, and finally, smart licensing for public cloud environments. You can either watch all the videos in order to get a full overview, or simply watch the videos that are of most interest. In this video, I'll be covering FTD licensing, and in particular for environments that are in controlled or air-gapped next-generation firewall deployments. So in the previous video, we covered the deployment modes that were focused more towards ease of use, so the direct cloud access or direct cloud via a proxy. In this one, we're going to talk about the more security-focused organizations that either need to require to have a mediated access via a satellite server or have a completely controlled or air-gapped network, in which case we have the options for license reservations. So we would use the smart software satellite server if your firepower management center is not connected to the internet, but it can connect to an internal server that can then connect onto the Cisco Cloud Authority or receive manual license updates. For license reservation, whether we use specific license reservation or permanent license reservation, sometimes referred to as universal, we can do this if your deployment is completely air-gapped and cannot connect to the licensing authority or to a satellite server or receive manual updates. We use the smart software satellite server for security-sensitive customers, so customers that cannot or do not want to manage licenses via a direct internet connection. The satellite server would typically be installed on the customer premises, and it provides a subset of what the full Cisco Smart Software Manager portal provides. And it still gives you an almost near real-time view of your licensing capabilities based on synchronization between the satellite server and the Cisco Smart Software Manager. So if we take a look at the workflow for deploying a satellite-based licensing server, it's very similar to the previous video we had about deploying the direct connections. However, there are a couple of extra steps involved. That would be to deploy and set up the satellite server first on-prem, configure the smart software satellite server in your management center, and then register your firepower management center to the actual satellite server itself. The rest of the steps in this process are the same as in the previous video. And finally on there we'll show you how to synchronize your satellite server with the CSSM. So if you take a look at the link at the bottom of the page on here, that will take you to more information on actually deploying, installing and configuring the satellite server on premise. As this video is specifically about firepower devices, we're going to focus on how we configure those to use or to interact with the satellite server. But as I say, if you do want more information on how to deploy and configure your satellite server, use the link at the bottom of this page and that will take you to that information. In terms of configuring the satellite server within the Firepower Management Center, first off, what you'll do is click on your integration options here and then select Smart Software Satellite. From here, you'll then be able to choose to use the actual Smart Software Satellite server. You'll enter the URL that you'll receive from your installation of the satellite server itself and the certificate as well, again, from that you'll have received from that setup. Now, when it comes to specific or permanent license reservations, these are, as I've said before, for security-sensitive customers that either don't want to have direct connection to the Cisco cloud service, or that have to have an air gap within their network environment. Specific or permanent license reservation has a few caveats. So first off, it does require authorization to use, and you can get that authorization from your Cisco representative. You would use this when you can't manage licenses via direct internet connections. Now, with specific license reservation, the licenses are reserved for a specified duration, whereas with permanent license reservation, or sometimes referred to as universal, then those licenses can be used for perpetuity. With specific license or permanent license reservation, there is no requirement to access the Cisco Smart Software Manager, but you must have enough licenses available to cover your actual estate and the devices and features that you have in your environment. You know, as you can see, there's oversubscription is not allowed, and your smart account must be authorized for export and restricted functionality. And again, when going through the authorization process with your Cisco representative, they can make sure that all of this is taken care of for you. Again, the process for defining the specific or permanent license reservation is relatively simple to actually licensing your devices using the direct method. However, there are a few extra steps involved. First off, you do need to ensure that you have a smart account, and you do need to obtain approval from your Cisco representative to enable the specific or permanent license reservation options. And then you do need to configure your Firepower Management Center or your Firepower Device Manager to enable these specific or permanent license options, because they are not enabled by default. So once you obviously ensure that you have your smart account, you've spoken with your Cisco representative to get approval to enable specific license reservation or permanent license reservation, one of the first things we need to do is enable that option within your FMC. So for SLR, for specific license reservation, what you will do is you will go into your system menu and you'll go to licenses, and you'll notice that the default licensing options, as you can see here, are smart licenses or classic licenses. So what we're going to need to do now is access the FMC, the Firepower Management Center's console, or the CLI, and from there we want to go into the expert mode. So from the command line we type in expert, dropping down into the expert mode, and from here then we can execute the following command. So we want to execute the command sudo space manage _ slr.pl. Once we do that, you'll see that we get a menu choice. From here we want to select option 2, enable SLR, and once you get confirmation that that has been successful, you will then select 0 to exit this menu. Now when you go back into your FMC and you click on System and Licenses, you'll see that that has changed now from smart licenses, and you can see that we've actually now got the new option of specific licenses. Now from here, when we go in, what we want to do here is, first off, we want to click on Generate, and that will allow us to generate a reservation request code that we can then send or deliver to the Cisco Smart Software Manager account to generate an authorization code. There is more information on that step coming up at the end of this slide. Once we've been through that process, we can then take the reservation authorization code and upload that into the FMC, and from there we can assign licenses, or the specific licenses, to the managed devices that require that specific license reservation. Now for reference, for step 2, I've included the steps there that you can go through on the Cisco Smart Software Manager portal, and that will help guide you through the steps required to actually enable and assign those specific license reservations. So feel free to take your time and go through that at your leisure. For permanent license reservation, or PLR, again we need to enable that specific licensing menu option. Here what I've done this using the new Light UI theme. So if you're using Firepower Management Center 6.5 or above, then you have the option to deploy or to configure using the new user interface. Here what we're going to do is click on the cog settings, and from there again you can see under licenses we've got the default view of smart licenses and classic licenses. Again, we need to run a script on here to change that. So same process as before with the SLR reservation. We access the FMC's CLI, we enter expert mode, and then we enter the following command. So in this case it's sudo space manage underscore plr.pl, and that will give us this following menu. And from here again we select option 2 to enable permanent license reservation, and once that has been successful we choose 0 to exit the tool. Now when we go back in and we go under our settings and under our licenses, you can see that that has changed now to universal licenses. Once that's been accepted, we go into universal licenses, and again it's almost the same procedure as the specific license reservation. Generate the code, use that code on the Cisco Smart Software Manager to generate an authorization code, and then install that authorization code into the FMC, and from there assign those permanent licenses to the managed devices. Again, for reference, I've put up the details here for you to go through step 2 of that. Again, do that at your own time as you're going through this process. Now, if we want to enable permanent license reservation on our on-box managed devices using the Firepower Device Manager, we can use the switch to universal permanent licensing. So this is the PLR capabilities on on-box devices. For FDM managed devices from version 6.6 and forward, there will be no SLR support, but they will support PLR. So in these cases, what we want to do on our device manager, we select the view configuration for our smart licenses. Once we're in there, we can then, over on the right hand side here, if we drop that cog down, we can see we can then have the option to switch to universal PLR licensing. Then we get presented with a warning. So if we are to switch to universal permanent licenses, it's just warning you that you cannot switch back to evaluation mode. So you will need licenses in your smart account if you want to remove the PLR and licenses box again, or re-image completely to put it back into a kind of a default, factory default for and enable the evaluation mode. Once you're happy with that, we can click on yes. And then step 4, that's going to take us through generating the codes, logging into the Smart Software Manager, and again it gives you the information here that you need to do on there. And then once you've got the authorization code, paste that into the option down below here. Now the actual approval process for this is relatively straightforward. So first thing what we need to do is open up a smart licensing support case on cisco.com/support. Make sure that the PLR SKUs that you have are used, or make sure you use the PLR SKUs and provide the required details. Submit the case, and then you will either get approval, the approval will be granted or it will be denied. But again, talk to your Cisco representative throughout this process, and they can help you through this stage. So on cisco.com, we can contact support and open up a new case, give it a name, specify the technology that's being used and the problem area licensing. And then as an example, you can use this type of information here to help speed up the process. So fill in there, make sure you put in the customer name, the smart account name, and the domain associated with the smart account, your smart account number, the country you're associated with, whether or not you're a government or military entity. Put in your sales order hardware numbers, the date of sales, and the SKUs that are required as well. And from a justification point of view, it could be something as simple as your devices cannot access the internet for security reasons. So fill in that information, and then you're away into the process of getting approval. So finally, I just wanted to leave you with a summary of the licensing models that we have. So we have the connected smart licensing, which probably the large majority of customers would use this, as it's the kind of the default and most simplest way of licensing. We have air gap licensing with specific license reservation, and we have air gap licensing with permanent license reservation. So you can see for the FMC, this has been around since 6.3. With Firepower Device Manager, that'll be around from 6.6. So we've got the customer profiles down here. So this, again, recommended for the majority of customers. And then the air gap or the SLR or PLR is recommended really only for customers with restricted networks. And again, remember, this does require approval. In connected smart licensing, your FMC or FTD can be connected either directly to the Cisco cloud or via a satellite server on-prem. And with the air gap licensing, typically there's no connectivity direct to the cloud, and there's also no support for connectivity to a satellite server. For connected and SLR, then all the feature licenses are available either as subscriptions for fixed durations, whereas with PLR, then all of the feature licenses are available in perpetuity. And from an enforcement point of view, again, there's no real hard enforcement. We do make sure that customers receive out of compliance warnings. And remember, for FTD, you've got that 90-day grace period where you can then adjust your configuration either by transferring licenses in from other virtual accounts or by purchasing additional licenses to cover your needs. When we get for specific license reservation, again, when subscriptions expire, the FMC will block the deploy and you won't be able to do any new device registration without the valid subscription. So that is a bit more of a hard cutoff, but this is for the features that you have actually subscribed to. And with permanent license, then there is no enforcement at this level. However, we do still insist that you check your smart accounts, make sure that you've got enough licenses available to cover your particular environment. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you found it useful, and please take some time to view the other videos in this series, as well as all of the other content that we have to offer. Bye for now.